The wind whipped across the prairie, a constant, mournful song that mirrored Sarah's own heart. Life was hardscrabble in this untamed land, a relentless cycle of toil and uncertainty. Their small homestead, a lonely speck against the vast horizon, offered little comfort. The sun beat down mercilessly in the summer, baking the earth to a cracked, dusty brown. Winters were brutal, with blizzards that howled for days, burying everything in a thick blanket of snow. Sarah yearned for a different life, one filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting embrace of a loving family. She dreamt of children playing in the fields, of a strong, supportive husband, and a home filled with love instead of the stark silence she often endured. Jedediah, her husband, was a man of few words, his face etched with the hardships of their existence. He was a provider of sorts, but affection was a rare commodity in their household. He spent most of his days working the land, his brow furrowed with worry about the crops, the weather, and the ever-present threat of starvation. Sarah tried to find joy in the small things, the vibrant colors of sunset, the gentle breeze rustling through the tall grass, the playful antics of the prairie dogs that scurried around their cabin. But a deep loneliness gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the family she so desperately craved. She longed to share her hopes and dreams with someone, to feel truly connected and understood. She pictured a cozy cabin filled with the aroma of baking bread and the sound of children's voices, a haven from the harsh realities of their world. She hoped one day her dreams would come true. She knew the land could be cruel, but she held on to the hope that kindness and love could blossom even in the most desolate of places. Perhaps, just perhaps, her own little family could thrive here too. The first flutterings of life within her brought a hesitant joy to Sarah's heart. She was pregnant. A new life was growing inside her, a tiny seed of hope in the barren landscape of her existence. She allowed herself to imagine tiny hands and feet, the soft cooing of a baby, the innocent gaze of a child looking up at her with adoration. For the first time in a long time, a genuine smile graced her lips. But her joy was soon tempered by a growing unease. Jedediah's reaction to the news was far from the celebratory embrace she had envisioned. He remained stoic, his face unreadable. He simply nodded curtly and returned to his work, as if she had announced the need to mend a fence rather than the imminent arrival of their child. As the months passed, Jedediah's silence grew heavier, his mood increasingly somber. Sarah noticed him watching the neighboring families, observing their sons helping with the chores, their strong hands already capable of contributing to the farm. She overheard him talking to a neighbor about the importance of a son to carry on the family name and inherit the land. Fear began to creep into Sarah's heart, a cold dread that settled in her stomach. She sensed Jedediah's growing obsession with having a son, the unspoken pressure for her to deliver a male heir. She tried to reassure herself that he would love their child regardless of its gender, but his behavior spoke volumes. One evening, as they sat in silence after a meager meal, Jedediah finally broke his silence. "It needs to be a son, Sarah," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "We need a son to work the land, to protect us." Sarah's heart sank. She looked at Jedediah, his face hardened by years of hardship and now contorted with a desperate desire. She knew then that her pregnancy, once a source of hope, had become a source of fear. She was carrying not just a child, but the weight of Jedediah's expectations, the burden of fulfilling his need for a son. The joy she had once felt was replaced by a chilling premonition of what was to come. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping that her child, whatever its gender, would be safe and loved. The labor pains started in the dead of night, sharp and unrelenting. Sarah bit down on a piece of cloth, trying to stifle her cries. Jedediah remained asleep in the bed beside her, his breathing heavy and oblivious to her suffering. She was alone, utterly alone, in her pain. As the hours dragged on, the pains intensified. Sarah felt like her body was being torn apart. She desperately needed help, but Jedediah remained unresponsive, lost in his own world. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline, she managed to rouse him. He grumbled and reluctantly helped her to the birthing stool. The birth was long and arduous. Sarah pushed and strained, her body screaming in protest. Jedediah stood by, his face impassive, offering no words of encouragement or comfort. He merely watched, his eyes narrowed, his expression betraying nothing of what he was feeling. Finally, with one last, agonizing push, the baby arrived. A tiny, wriggling form, covered in blood and vernix. Sarah collapsed back against the birthing stool, exhausted but relieved. She reached out to take her child, eager to hold her close and shower her with love. But Jedediah snatched the baby away before Sarah could reach her. He held the infant up, his eyes scanning the tiny body. A look of disgust washed over his face. "It's a girl," he said, his voice cold and hard. He thrust the baby back at Sarah, his movements rough and uncaring. Sarah cradled her daughter in her arms, tears streaming down her face. She had hoped, against all odds, that Jedediah would accept their child, regardless of its gender. But his reaction confirmed her worst fears. Without a word, Jedediah turned and walked out of the cabin, slamming the door behind him. Sarah was left alone, bleeding and exhausted, with her newborn daughter. She looked down at the tiny face nestled in her arms, her heart aching with a mixture of love and despair. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Jedediah would never forgive her for giving him a daughter instead of a son. He had made his feelings abundantly clear. He had abandoned her and their child. She was alone, wounded, and utterly vulnerable. The prairie wind howled outside, a mournful symphony to her shattered dreams. The first few days were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and fear. Sarah's body was weak and sore, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. She could barely move, but she had to care for her baby. She named her Hope, a fragile promise in a world that seemed determined to crush her. Food was scarce. Jedediah had taken what little they had, leaving her with barely enough to survive. Sarah rationed what remained, knowing that every bite she took was one less for Hope. She tried to nurse the baby, but her milk was slow to come in. Hope cried constantly, her tiny body racked with hunger. The weather was unforgiving. The days were scorching hot, and the nights were bitterly cold. The cabin offered little protection from the elements. Sarah huddled with Hope, trying to keep her warm and safe. She feared for her daughter's life, knowing how fragile babies were. Each day was a struggle for survival. Sarah battled infection, hunger, and the gnawing fear that she wouldn't be able to protect her daughter. She tried to ignore the pain in her body, focusing all her energy on keeping Hope alive. She sang lullabies, her voice raspy and weak, but filled with love. One morning, Sarah woke up to find herself even weaker than before. The bleeding had worsened, and she felt dizzy and faint. She knew that she was losing strength, and that time was running out. She looked at Hope, her tiny face pale and drawn. "I won't let you die," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I promise." She knew she had to do something, but she was too weak to travel. She scanned the horizon, praying for a miracle. She needed help, and she needed it soon. She knew that if she didn't get help, both she and Hope would perish. The prairie, once a symbol of her dreams, now seemed like a vast, desolate grave. Her hope was dwindling, but she clung to it with all her might, for Hope's sake. She would fight for her daughter's life, even if it meant sacrificing her own. Dust devils danced across the horizon, mocking Sarah's desperation. She lay slumped against the cabin wall, too weak to even sit up properly. Hope whimpered in her arms, her cries growing fainter with each passing day. Sarah closed her eyes, picturing her own mother, wishing she were here to offer comfort and guidance. But her mother was long gone, lost to a fever years ago. Suddenly, a shadow fell across her face. Sarah opened her eyes, squinting against the harsh sunlight. A figure stood before her, tall and imposing, silhouetted against the bright sky. She couldn't make out his features, but she could sense his presence, a powerful energy that both frightened and intrigued her. As the figure moved closer, Sarah could see that it was a Native American warrior. He was dressed in buckskin, his face painted with intricate designs. A long, feathered headdress adorned his head, swaying gently in the breeze. He carried a bow, an arrow, and a knife was strapped to his thigh. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard stories about the Cheyenne, tales of their fierce warriors and their unwavering loyalty to their tribe. She had always feared them, believing them to be savage and unforgiving. But now, as she looked into the warrior's eyes, she saw something different, a glimmer of compassion, a hint of understanding. The warrior spoke, his voice deep and resonant. Sarah didn't understand his words, but she could sense his concern. He gestured towards Hope, then towards Sarah, his eyes filled with questions. Sarah managed a weak smile. "Help," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "Please help us." The warrior studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he knelt down beside her, his movements gentle and respectful. He reached out and touched Hope's tiny hand, his touch surprisingly light and tender. He looked back at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and determination. Sarah didn't know what he was going to do, but she knew that this encounter could be the difference between life and death. This Cheyenne warrior, a man she had always feared, might be their only hope. Walks with the Wind, as he was known to his people, felt a pang of sorrow as he gazed upon the frail woman and her even frailier child. He was on a hunting expedition, far from his village, when he spotted the dilapidated cabin. Curiosity, and perhaps a deeper instinct, had drawn him closer. He had seen the signs of desperation, the overgrown yard, the boarded-up windows, the unmistakable aura of despair that clung to the place. He knew the stories the white settlers told about his people, tales of savagery and violence. He knew they feared him, just as their fear had been etched on the woman's face when he first appeared. But Walks with the Wind was not a monster. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a man of compassion, bound by the traditions of his tribe to help those in need. However, helping this woman and her child presented a dilemma. His tribe was already struggling to survive, facing dwindling resources and constant encroachment from the white settlers. Bringing a white woman and her baby into their village would be a risk, a potential source of conflict and disruption. His people might not understand his decision, and he could face criticism and even ostracism. He thought of his own family, his mother and sisters, and the values they had instilled in him. He had been taught to respect all life, to honor the earth, and to offer assistance to those who were suffering. He remembered the stories of his ancestors, who had often helped strangers in need, regardless of their race or origin. He also considered the potential consequences. The white settlers would likely retaliate if they discovered that a Cheyenne warrior had taken in one of their own. It could lead to bloodshed and further escalate the already tense relations between the two groups. Walks with the Wind closed his eyes, seeking guidance from the Great Spirit. He prayed for wisdom and strength to make the right decision. He knew that whatever he chose, there would be consequences. But he also knew that he couldn't simply turn his back on this woman and her child. He was torn between his duty to his tribe and his compassion for these two helpless souls. He opened his eyes, his decision made. He would help them, whatever the cost. He just hoped his people would understand. Walks with the Wind gently lifted Sarah into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. He then carefully scooped up Hope, cradling her close to his chest. He knew he couldn't leave them here to die. His decision was made, and now he had to act. He began the long journey back to his village, his pace steady and determined. He knew that time was of the essence. Sarah was weak and needed medical attention, and Hope was starving. He had to reach his village as quickly as possible. As they traveled, Walks with the Wind kept a watchful eye on Sarah and Hope. He stopped frequently to offer them water and berries, doing his best to keep them comfortable. He spoke to them in his native tongue, even though he knew they couldn't understand him. He told them stories of his people, of their traditions and beliefs, hoping to ease their fears and build a sense of trust. Sarah, though still weak, felt a sense of relief. She didn't know where Walks with the Wind was taking them, but she trusted him. She could see the kindness in his eyes, the genuine concern for their well-being. She knew that he was risking everything to help them, and she was grateful for his selflessness. Hope, too, seemed to sense the change in their circumstances. She cried less and slept more peacefully in Walks with the Wind's arms. It was as if she knew that they were finally safe, that someone was looking out for them. The journey was arduous, but Walks with the Wind pressed on, his determination fueled by his compassion for Sarah and Hope. He knew that they faced many challenges ahead, but he was confident that they could overcome them together. He had made a promise to protect them, and he intended to keep it no matter the cost. He pictured his village, wondering how his people would react to his unexpected arrival. He hoped they would accept Sarah and Hope, and that they could all find a way to live together in peace. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he believed it was possible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The Cheyenne village came into view, a cluster of teepees nestled in a sheltered valley beside a clear, rushing stream. Smoke curled lazily into the sky from cooking fires, and the sounds of children playing and women chatting filled the air. It was a scene of peace and tranquility, a stark contrast to the harshness of the prairie Sarah had known. As Walks with the Wind approached the village, the activity ceased. People stopped what they were doing and stared, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The children hid behind their mothers, their eyes wide with apprehension. The warriors stepped forward, their hands resting on their weapons. Walks with the Wind raised his hand in a gesture of peace, signaling that he meant no harm. He spoke to the villagers in his native tongue, explaining his unexpected arrival and the circumstances that had led him to bring Sarah and Hope to their village. He told them of Sarah's plight, of her abandonment and her desperate need for help. He pleaded with them to show compassion and understanding, reminding them of their traditions of hospitality and generosity. The villagers listened intently, their faces still etched with concern. They had never seen a white woman in their village before, and they were unsure how to react. Some were wary, fearing that Sarah and Hope would bring trouble. Others were more sympathetic, recognizing the shared humanity that bound them together. Finally, an elderly woman stepped forward. She was the village elder, a respected figure known for her wisdom and kindness. She approached Walks with the Wind and examined Sarah and Hope closely. She touched Sarah's face gently, her eyes filled with compassion. She then took Hope into her arms, cradling her close and whispering soothing words. The elder turned to the villagers and spoke in a clear, strong voice. She reminded them of the importance of helping those in need, regardless of their race or origin. She told them that Sarah and Hope were vulnerable and deserving of their kindness. She urged them to open their hearts and welcome them into their community. The villagers listened to the elder's words, and their faces began to soften. They understood that Walks with the Wind had done the right thing, and they were willing to accept Sarah and Hope into their village. They approached Sarah, offering her food, water, and a place to rest. They welcomed her and Hope with open arms, demonstrating the true meaning of compassion and community. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude. Perhaps, just perhaps, she and Hope had finally found a safe haven. Life in the Cheyenne village was unlike anything Sarah had ever known. The pace was slower, more attuned to the rhythms of nature. The people were kind and generous, always willing to share what they had. There was a strong sense of community, everyone working together to support each other. The women of the village took Sarah under their wing, teaching her their ways. They showed her how to gather herbs for healing, how to prepare traditional foods, and how to make clothing from animal hides. They taught her their language, patiently repeating words and phrases until she could understand and speak them. Sarah, in turn, shared her own knowledge and skills with the women. She showed them how to sew and knit, how to make soap and candles, and how to preserve food for the winter. She told them stories of her life on the prairie, of the challenges she had faced, and the dreams she still held. As Sarah spent more time in the village, she began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The nutritious food and the clean air helped her regain her strength. The kindness and support of the villagers soothed her wounded heart. She began to laugh again, to smile, and to feel a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. She also began to form a bond with Walks with the Wind. He would often visit her in the evenings, sharing stories of his hunts and his travels. He taught her about the Cheyenne way of life, their respect for nature, and their deep connection to the Great Spirit. He listened patiently as she talked about her past, offering words of comfort and encouragement. Sarah admired Walks with the Wind's strength, his wisdom, and his unwavering sense of honor. She was grateful for his kindness, his generosity, and his willingness to risk everything to help her and Hope. She found herself drawn to him, not just as a rescuer, but as a man. Walks with the Wind, too, felt a growing connection to Sarah. He admired her resilience, her courage, and her unwavering love for her daughter. He was drawn to her gentle spirit, her open heart, and her willingness to learn and adapt to a new way of life. He found himself spending more and more time with her, drawn to her warmth and her genuine smile. He knew that their relationship was unconventional, but he couldn't deny the feelings that were growing between them. He also knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The Cheyenne women embraced Hope as one of their own. They took turns caring for her, feeding her, and singing her lullabies. They showed Sarah how to make soft, comfortable clothing for Hope from deerskin, and how to create toys from natural materials like wood and feathers. They taught her ancient remedies to soothe Hope's ailments, using herbs and plants gathered from the surrounding land. Sarah watched in amazement as the women interacted with Hope, their faces filled with love and tenderness. She had never experienced such a strong sense of female bonding before. In her previous life, she had felt isolated and alone, with no one to turn to for support. But here in the Cheyenne village, she was surrounded by women who understood her struggles and were willing to help her in any way they could. She learned that Cheyenne women held a powerful position in their society. They were responsible for managing the household, raising the children, and maintaining the traditions of the tribe. They were respected for their wisdom, their strength, and their ability to nurture and protect their families. Sarah felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. She was no longer an outsider, a stranger in a foreign land. She was part of a community, a valued member of a tribe. She was surrounded by people who cared about her and her daughter, who were willing to share their lives with her. She watched Hope thriving under the care of the Cheyenne women. The baby was growing stronger and healthier every day, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and joy. Sarah realized that Hope was finally safe, that she was surrounded by love and support. Sarah started to learn the Cheyenne language more fluently, and she was able to communicate with the women more easily. They shared stories of their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. Sarah learned about their traditions, their beliefs, and their deep connection to the land. She realized that they were not so different from her, that they all shared the same basic desires for love, family, and happiness. She had found a true home. She felt accepted and loved, something she had been longing for her entire life. The loneliness that had plagued her for so long was finally beginning to fade away. Months had passed since Sarah had arrived in the Cheyenne village. She had almost forgotten what life was like before, the loneliness and the hardship. She was content, surrounded by people who loved and supported her and Hope. One day, as Sarah was helping the women prepare a meal, a commotion erupted near the edge of the village. People were shouting, pointing toward the figure approaching on horseback. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the figure immediately. It was Jedediah. He rode into the village, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and desperation. He dismounted and approached Sarah, his eyes filled with remorse. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling, "I've come to ask for your forgiveness." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. She couldn't believe that he was here, that he had the audacity to show his face after abandoning her and Hope. "What do you want, Jedediah?" she asked, her voice cold and hard. "I was wrong, Sarah," he said, his eyes pleading. "I was blinded by my pride and my desire for a son. I realize now that Hope is a blessing, a precious gift. I want you both to come home with me." Sarah was stunned. She didn't know what to say. She looked at Hope, who was playing nearby, her face radiant with happiness. She looked at Walks with the Wind, who stood beside her, his expression unreadable. She knew that her decision would affect not only her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Jedediah continued, "but I'm begging you, Sarah. Please give me another chance. Let me be a father to Hope, a husband to you." He explained that the winter had been harsh, and he had nearly lost the farm. He said he had been consumed by guilt and remorse, realizing the terrible mistake he had made. He had searched for her for months, finally tracking her to the Cheyenne village. Sarah's mind raced. Part of her longed for the familiar comfort of her old life, for the security of her own home. But another part of her knew that she could never go back to the way things were before. She had changed, and so had her priorities. She looked at Jedediah, searching for any sign of genuine remorse. She had to decide if he was truly sorry, or if he just wanted a free farmhand and someone to take care of him. The decision was hers, and it was one she couldn't take lightly. Sarah spent the next few days in turmoil, weighing her options. She spoke with the village elder, seeking her guidance. The elder listened patiently, then offered her advice. "Follow your heart, Sarah," she said. "Choose the path that will bring you and Hope the most happiness." Sarah also spoke with Walks with the Wind. She told him about Jedediah's offer, about her confusion and her fear. Walks with the Wind listened silently, his eyes filled with understanding. He didn't try to influence her decision, but he made it clear that he would support her, no matter what she chose. He confessed his feelings for her, telling her that he loved her and that he wanted her and hoped to stay with him in the village. He promised to protect them, to cherish them, and to give them a life filled with love and happiness. Sarah was touched by his words, but she knew that she couldn't make her decision based solely on her feelings for Walks with the Wind. She had to consider what was best for Hope. She had to think about her future, about the kind of life she wanted to provide for her daughter. She thought about her old life on the prairie, about the hard work and the loneliness. She remembered Jedediah's coldness, his obsession with having a son, and his willingness to abandon her and Hope when she failed to meet his expectations. She thought about her new life in the Cheyenne village, about the warmth in the community, about the love and support she had found. She thought about Walks with the Wind, his kindness, his strength, and his unwavering commitment to her and Hope. She realized that she had a choice to make, a choice between the past and the future, between a life of loneliness and a life of love. She knew that it wouldn't be an easy decision, but she also knew that she had to make it. She had to choose the path that would lead her and Hope to a brighter future. She spent a night under the stars, asking the Great Spirit for guidance. She needed to make the right choice, a choice that would give Hope the best life possible, and one that would finally bring Sarah the happiness she deserved. She finally knew what she needed to do. The next morning, Sarah gathered the villagers together. She stood beside Walks with the Wind, holding Hope close to her. Jedediah stood apart, his face filled with anxiety. Sarah spoke to the villagers in both Cheyenne and English, explaining her decision. "I have made my choice," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I will not be returning to my old life. I have found a new home here, with you, with the Cheyenne people. I have found love and acceptance, and I cannot leave that behind." Jedediah's face fell. He stepped forward, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, please," he said, "don't do this. Give me another chance. I can change. I promise." Walks with the Wind stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and Jedediah. His eyes were filled with a quiet strength. "Sarah has made her decision," he said, his voice firm. "You must respect her choice." Jedediah glared at Walks with the Wind, his face contorted with anger. "This is none of your business," he snarled. "This is between me and my wife." "Sarah is not your property," Walks with the Wind replied, his voice calm but unwavering. "She is a free woman, and she has the right to choose her own path." "You have no right to interfere," Jedediah retorted, his hand moving towards the knife at his belt. "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Walks with the Wind stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Jedediah's. "I will not allow you to threaten Sarah," he said. She is under my protection, and I will defend her." The two men stood facing each other, their bodies tense with. The tension in the air was thick, palpable. The villagers watched, their faces etched with concern. Sarah stepped forward, placing her hand on Walks with the Wind's arm. "Enough," she said, her voice firm. "There will be no violence here." She turned to Jedediah, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I appreciate you coming here, Jedediah," she said. "I understand that you regret your actions, but I cannot go back. I have found a new life here, a new family. I have found love and acceptance, and I cannot abandon that." Jedediah looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with despair. He saw the determination in her face, the unwavering resolve in her eyes. He knew that he had lost her, that there was no going back. He sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I hope you find happiness here, Sarah. I hope you and Hope have a good life." He turned and walked away, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The villagers watched him go, their hearts filled with a mixture of pity and relief. Sarah turned to Walks with the Wind, her eyes filled with love. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Walks with the Wind smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You are welcome, Sarah," he said. "You and Hope are part of our family now. You belong here." Sarah looked around at the villagers, at their smiling faces, their welcoming gestures. She felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had made the right decision. She had chosen love over loneliness, community over isolation. She had chosen a new life, a new future. She smiled, knowing that she was finally home. She knew that the future would not always be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she would never be alone again. She had Walks with the Wind, Hope, and the entire village by her side. She could ask for nothing more. Sarah and Walks with the Wind became husband and wife, their union celebrated by the entire village. They built a new teepee, a symbol of their love and commitment to each other. It stood proudly among the other teepees, a testament to the blending of two different worlds. Walks with the Wind became a father to Hope, loving her as if she were his own child. He taught her about the Cheyenne way of life, about the importance of respecting nature, and about the power of the Great Spirit. He took her on hunting trips, showing her how to track animals and how to survive in the wilderness. Sarah, in turn, taught Walks with the Wind about her own culture, about the importance of education, and about the power of love and compassion. She shared stories of her childhood, of her dreams, and of the challenges she had overcome. Together, they created a unique and beautiful family, blending the best of both worlds. They celebrated Cheyenne traditions and American holidays, creating a rich and diverse culture for Hope to grow up in. They taught Hope to speak both Cheyenne and English, to respect both cultures, and to embrace her heritage. They instilled in her a strong sense of self-worth, a deep love for her family, and an unwavering commitment to helping others. Hope grew into a strong, intelligent, and compassionate young woman. She was proud of her heritage, grateful for the love and support of her family, and determined to make a positive impact on the world. She became a bridge between the Cheyenne and the white settlers, helping to foster understanding and cooperation between the two groups. Sarah and Walks with the Wind watched Hope grow with pride and joy. They knew that they had created something special, something that would last for generations to come. They had built a family based on love, respect, and understanding, a family that transcended cultural boundaries. They were a testament to the power of love to heal, to unite, and to create a better world. Their teepee was always open to everyone, a symbol of the welcoming spirit that defined their family. Their home was a beacon of hope, shining brightly on the prairie. Sarah's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still blossom. It shows us that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that family is not always defined by blood, but by the bonds of affection and commitment. Her journey highlights the importance of acceptance, of embracing diversity, and of looking beyond cultural differences to see the shared humanity that unites us all. It reminds us that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, regardless of their background or beliefs. Sarah found strength in the Cheyenne people, in their unwavering support, their deep sense of community, and their profound connection to nature. She learned from them the importance of living in harmony with the earth, of respecting all living things, and of finding peace within oneself. She also found strength in walks with the wind, in his courage, his compassion, and his unwavering love for her and hope. He taught her the meaning of true partnership, of standing up for what is right, and of never giving up on those you care about. And most importantly, Sarah found strength within herself, in her ability to overcome adversity, to adapt to new circumstances, and to create a new life filled with love and happiness. She learned that she was capable of anything, that she could face any challenge, as long as she had the love and support of her family and friends. Sarah's story is a reminder that we are all stronger than we think we are, that we all have the power to create our own destinies, and that even when life throws us the most difficult challenges, we can still find happiness, love, and fulfillment. It is a story of hope, of resilience, and of the transformative power of love. It is a story that will inspire us to open our hearts, to embrace diversity, and to never give up on our dreams. It is a story that will remind us that even in the wildest of Western tales, love and kindness can always win. Sarah's journey continues to inspire generations of Cheyenne and settlers alike. It is told around campfires and in schools to remind everyone that love knows no boundaries.